You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. And be sure to smash that like button.
We've had great success with Brice Brown's players from Edna Karr. So adding another quality player to that position that's from the state of Louisiana, that didn't seem to be a hard one for me to solve.
That was Brian Kelly on Saturday. Of course, you mentioned Brice Brown, the head coach at Edna Karr, has won 5 state championships during his tenure there. It's been a stellar run, and Edna Karr has been a real pipeline of talent to the LSU program as well. Who Brian Kelly was referring to right there is Destyn Hill, of course, an Edna Karr player who went to Florida State and is now at LSU. And Brice Brown's good enough to join us for a couple of minutes. Coach, we appreciate it. How are you?
Thanks for having me on. Hope y'all doing good. Doing good today. That rain stopped and looked like we could have a little practice today.
All right. Is spring balls cranked up there in NOLA?
No, we got weights and we got a little conditioning test today. So I don't know how fired up they are about that, but I'm a little fired up about
it. As a coach, you got to be. That's the kind of thing that you get pumped about. Hey, get out and run some 110s now. Glad those days are over. And let me start, Coach, if I could, with what Brian Kelly mentioned there. It's Destyn Hill, a guy that some may remember from his time at Karr, but he took a long journey here to LSU. It was interesting hearing Brian Kelly talk about Destyn Hill's physicality. That was kind of the thing that he punctuated. What can you tell us about Destyn Hill, the football player?
I thought BK did a good job of, especially, saying how physical of a player he is. He's about 6'1.5", about 200 pounds. He did outstanding for us in the blocking scheme, but, he does have that skill set to where, I think when he does practice without the brace after spring ball, I think you'll see an even more fluid athlete out there. I think it's quite remarkable that he's playing with that brace on and able to make the plays that he's making out there. But, a good physical player in the run game. He's going to be one of the smarter guys, too. He's going to be able to pick up the system pretty quickly.
It's interesting, too, because, the last Saturday when I was out there, he was running with the ones when they were doing short yardage. It was really an eye on that physical blocking component. Do you think that's his easiest path to the field in year one?
I think so. I think each player, especially when you're playing wide out, they're going to bring their own specific skill set to the game. One of those skill sets for Destin is his physical nature. But I hope he gets to get in that end zone a little bit too. And that's all about productivity and knowing the offense and especially establishing a run game that Coach Kelly has been preaching about this spring and is bringing the physical presence and, putting a hat on the hat and helping Aiden, spring a lot of those long runs with wideouts blocking downfield.
Yeah. One of the reasons why it might be hard for someone like Destin or any of the new guys, you got another young guy in Taron Francis who's on campus right now, to find playing time because there's so many veterans. One of them's Aaron Anderson, who's another guy who you had at Edna Karr, went to Bama and is now at LSU. When you look at Aaron Anderson's path, right, from 5-star to Bama to LSU, where wasn't super impactful year one, but now led the team in receiving a year ago and now poised for a massive final season, how would you sort of characterize Aaron's journey to this point if I asked you, go back to what it was like during his recruitment and then where he is now?
I thought, he's been very patient, and I think that's probably the right word to use for him. Coach Aidan loved him at Alabama, but, he wanted to come closer to home. And when Coach Kelly first got the job, he did a good job of following up, even though it turned over so quick. Relationships mean a lot in this state, and, I thought it was, clear cut that he was going to return back home after he expressed, wanting to get closer to home from Alabama. But, him being very patient and getting healthy has been key for him as well. I think this is the healthiest he's been. He's looked outstanding at practice. I actually was in Baton Rouge yesterday watching him do a little extra work, and he looks very fluid. He looks happy. The offense is very explosive. When you have one of the best quarterbacks in the country, he's making good plays out there. But I think him being healthy and being patient has been the key two words for him, and he has to keep those two. Especially with a fully loaded room. Some games is going to be this wide out. Some games is going to be that wide out. I think that the biggest stat is going to be, how many wins the Tigers put up, and I think he's all on board with, trying to compete for a national title.
Brice Brown is our guest, head coach at Edna Karr. It's interesting. So you talk about the depth there. Another piece is Taron Francis, right? The freshman, he's an early enrollee. Looks good in that 83 running around out there. It'll be interesting to see what kind of role he may be able to fill as a true freshman in a very talented receiving room. But what is LSU getting? Like, for the fans who maybe haven't seen Taron Francis yet, who might be listening, what is LSU getting in freshman receiver Taron Francis?
An explosive playmaker. He's made some good explosive plays at a few other practices I've been at. He's going to be a Tiger that you want to remember his name because, he's so explosive when he has the ball in his hand, and he's learning from a good group of veteran guys, how to move throughout college and prepare, take care of his body, attack the weight room. So he's learning from some good guys, not only just Aaron or Destin from Karr, but he's learning from Varian and Aidan, especially, all those guys, they're pouring so much into him and Chris. And, we're very appreciative of, the maturation process that he's shown through the 3 months since he's been at LSU.
He's, they call him man-child. You can see why when he's running around out there, man. He looks good in the uniform. Brice Brown's with us. Hey, why? Coach, I'm going to talk about the current commits here in a second, but why do you think that Edna Karr has become such just a very fruitful pipeline for this LSU program?
I think if you go back in our years past, we've sent a lot of guys to a lot of places, and a lot of those guys come back and tell us, they wish they stayed home, and been able to, especially for their families, to see them play, and their old park ball coaches and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's something that's not talked about a lot in recruiting. Having that support system around, so much is caught on NIL and all of those things, but people matter and relationships matter and family matters still in recruiting. And I think LSU has done a good job of selling that home to all of the players that they're recruiting and the future players who are committed to them right now on exactly that. Being able to stay home, play for your state, and all of that stuff. Coach Wilson has done a great job with partnership with Coach Kelly, too, who's very instrumental in the recruitment of, Richard and Aiden. And I think, that can't go without mentioning the family, sense of family that they represent or sell when they're talking about the brand of LSU, not just the football.
You mentioned Coach Frank, and I think everybody knows Coach Frank's role and how integral he is in New Orleans. But it's interesting to hear you talk about Coach Kelly. Obviously, he's worn out a path, I'm certain, from Baton Rouge to Edna Karr. What's been your interactions with and your impressions of getting to know Brian Kelly these last several years as a coach and as a recruiter?
I think, my relationship with him, it's not just head coach to head coach. And I think Coach Kelly is a good friend. And, he's very, very available. He's very authentic when you speak to him. Anytime you have a question or if he wants to holler at you about anything, he picks up the phone and gives you a call. We had a champions lunch with all the state championship coaches last week, and he was great, and he was open, he was honest, he was straightforward, and then got a chance to listen to him at the clinic. And he's always been available to us. He's visited here, and whenever he has a chance, head coaches are so restricted in how much they come out, but when he's able to come out, he comes here, and the players love him, and he plays a big part in the recruiting along with Coach Frank, because when you hear it from the head coach, that still means something, especially how much they value the relationship or the partnership between Karr and LSU. And I think he's done a great job of expressing that and we look forward to the future Tigers that's going to be there, especially with Richard and Aiden. They're excited, but we got to hold on to him for a couple of months and try to repeat this thing, and then he can have them.
Yeah.
But until then, we just appreciate the availability that LSU has brought to our program.
Got a couple more for you, Coach. And Brice Brown from Edna Karr is our guest. You mentioned Richard and Aiden. That, of course, is Richard Anderson and Aiden Hall, two commitments currently at LSU or Edna Karr prospects. You and I kind of texted offline about Richard Anderson, primarily because of the Kyle Williams component of it all and Bo Davis leaving. Can you kind of just walk us through how Bo leaving might affect Richard's recruitment and just your early impressions of Kyle Williams and the job that he's done so far, not only just in conversation, but now since they've started spring, you get to sort of observe?
I tell you what, just like I said last week, I was very impressed with meeting Kyle for the first time last week, and I went to the practice this past Saturday, and, we ran into each other and spoke again. He met our defensive line coach and our defensive coordinator. I tell you what, when you talk about knowledge of the game and expressing, why you're doing certain things, he can teach that. And you can see it with the defense at LSU right now. They're playing more of a attack style and more up the field, not down the line as much. And I think, that's what really caught Richard's attention is the coaching style, the coaching technique. It's not just about the guys behind you and covering up for linebackers so they can make plays. They want the D-line to make plays as well. And that's been the biggest eye-opener for Richard and his reestablishing that commitment to LSU because, the schemes fit him so well. But Kyle has been great. He's a family guy. He's very relatable. He knows the situation because he was a high school coach, and when you think about college coaches versus high school coaches, a lot of the high school coaches, they see it, they're dealing with a lot of things off the field, and Kyle understands that part, and he understands, what Richard goals is and stuff like that, and they hit it off from day one. But I think it's always good having a pro teaching a future pro, and I think Richard has the upside of that.
I know a lot of LSU fans are going to be excited to hear that. It's kind of a big exhale. Richard Anderson's number one defensive tackle in the country. He's down in New Orleans. It certainly feels like a must for LSU. And then if I could, Coach, get a thought on Aiden Hall as well at the safety position.
Yeah, and Aiden, he's been on campus. He went last week. I think both guys will return back after LSU comes off of spring break. I don't know if they'll go for the spring finale with the practice, but I think they'll go for, a couple of practices just to see them get after it. But Aiden has done, well at recruiting. Handling the recruiting. When you have Texas and Florida and Texas A&M and Alabama knocking at your door, it's always good to go flirt with the neighbor. But when you got something good at home, I think he's realized that. Both of those guys have solidified their commitment to LSU and Coach Kelly and his staff. And, the Blake and his staff has done a great job of recruiting both of these guys, with Frank and BK as well. But, Blake has done a good job of making himself available and talking scheme and talking ball. And, it's been refreshing. It's been different, but I tell you what, it's not just been about NIL and how much you can give me. It's all about the scheme and how they could develop these players into the future, NFL pros that we all think they're going to be. And I think that's the biggest part in recruitment, not about, just the dollars that they can give, but, also the development that they're going to have. And I think that's been the biggest part for both Richard and Aiden. We haven't even gotten that far with LSU yet, but I think, they having that relationship with LSU is good enough to trust that they'll take care of, their own.
Edna Karr built a pretty populous pipeline to Baton Rouge, and that relationship's been really good, and Brice Brown's been a massive part of that. Coach, we appreciate the time. We're pulling for you and your guys' fault, except, of course, when you play the Bears, but you know that by now, right?
I ran into Coach Fuller this week, and I said, man, you gotta take it easy on me this year, man. And there's been some great games with Catholic, and we love playing those guys. Very, very competitive.
Well, it's great for high school football in the state when you get the best teams in the state to play. So it's always entertaining. Coach, we appreciate a couple of minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.